This is one of those stories that reminds you just how dangerous the open ocean really is. On board El Fausto were three very experienced fishermen and sailors. They were the brothers Ramon and Eliberto Hernandez, as well as their cousin Miguel Acosta. As the three men are standing on their boat, they see this man running down the dock, and the man introduced himself as Julio Garcia. He was clearly very upset. His wife had called him earlier that day, and she said their 2-year-old daughter was very sick and he needed to come home right away. And so, of course, the El Fausto crew said, we're actually going to La Palma and we'd be happy to take you. You don't need to pay for this. When the Fausto crew was supposed to arrive at La Palma, they didn't. So this search boat goes out, and for hours and hours and hours, they're looking along the exact same charted course, and they're nowhere to be found. And so they radio back in to the owner of the boat, and he called them back in, and he realized that, you know what, if we can't find them anywhere near the route, that probably something more sinister has happened to them. And it was at this point that he got in touch with authorities. Planes and boats spilled out over the sea to look for El Fausto and her crew. These guys don't have much in the way of supplies. If we don't find them within a couple of days, there's a very good chance that we're going to find 4 corpses. 4 days after that, a British ship called Duquesa radioed in an incredible message. They said they had found this fishing boat that was drifting along, and it was, of course, El Fausto. They had drifted way, way off course. But they could see that not only were the 4 crew members alive, they actually seemed like they were in pretty good spirits. And very quickly, that message was passed to friends and family. They were overjoyed because they thought they were dead. But after the initial transmission had been sent out saying, hey, we found the crew, the Duquesa sent another transmission that was very strange. They said the crew of El Fausto was refusing to be towed back home. They were saying that our boat's just fine, we just need a couple of supplies and we'll be on our way. And so the captain of Duquesa says to the men, then why are you out here? Something had to have gone wrong with your boat. So what happened? But the men didn't really answer his question. They just said, oh no, there's nothing wrong with our boat. Even Julio, who had made this special effort to get home to his sick daughter, even he is saying, no, we don't need a tow, we're good. And so the captain of the Duquesa is looking at these guys thinking, what am I missing here? We're offering to bring you to shore and you're telling us to leave? And apparently they were very polite about it. And so ultimately the crew of the Duquesa obliged their request. They watched as the 4 men sailed east towards La Palma, and they were waving the whole time. Everything seemed fine. And then they vanished over the horizon. And the captain of Duquesa would call in over the radio that they should expect to see them arriving at port at about 7 p.m. that night. Back on La Palma, friends, family, and hundreds of other people from the island went down to the dock, having a big party, celebrating the imminent return of their friends and their loved ones. But unfortunately, 7 p.m. came and went, and they didn't show up. The family of the crew became very worried that, oh my gosh, this nightmare is starting all over again. And so friends and family and some diehard supporters stayed down at the dock for several more hours until it became clear that something's gone wrong, and unfortunately, this nightmare is not over. Spain kicked off their largest ever search for missing people. They had bombers flying overhead, they had military and civilian ships all over the area, and for 2 weeks they looked everywhere and they couldn't find anything. And they declared them lost at sea, which basically meant we think they're dead, but we'll probably never know for sure. 2 months later, on October 9th, an Italian merchant ship called the Anna de Mayo, who was on their way to Venezuela, spotted a small fishing boat way off in the distance that was just bobbing around aimlessly. And the first thing they noticed was, this ship is far too small to be making a cross-oceanic voyage. They shouldn't be out here. And as they got closer, they could tell that there was no one standing on deck or in the cabin. There's no one driving this boat. And so finally they got so close they could read the hull, and it says El Fausto. And 2 of the Italian sailors get on board El Fausto, and they're yelling out to see if anybody's there, but no one's responding. And they're looking around, and the ship is in great condition. They go into the cabin where the steering wheel is, and they're looking for some sort of logbook that would have documented what happened on the ship, but there's no logbook. And so the Italians were left scratching their head thinking, how could a perfectly seaworthy boat wind up abandoned in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Where's their crew? They make their way over to the section of the deck where there's this hatch that they open up. and they look down and they smell this horrible smell, and they turn on their light and they're met with this horrible and inexplicable scene. Laying on the ground inside of the engine room on his back was a dead man. He had no clothes on and he was clutching a transistor radio. One of them actually went down to look around for clues and see if perhaps there's other bodies down there. It was just the one body, and he could only find one other clue, and it was this small notebook that was positioned right behind the dead body that they didn't see when they first looked down. So the Italian sailors leave the engine room and they take the notebook back to their ship, and they open it up, and the first thing they see is the middle section of the notebook has been torn out. In fact, 28 pages were missing, and all they were left with was a couple of pages at the beginning and a single page at the end. The first couple of pages just were a couple of notes and some simple math calculations. Nothing significant. The last page appeared to be a farewell of sorts, but the language that was used was a little bit confusing and it was difficult to read. And so the captain of the Ana de Mayo radios in to Spanish authorities that they've found El Fausto and that they intend to tow it back to Venezuela, where they were already going, at which point they'll turn over everything they found and authorities can take it from there. So the Italians put a tow line on the bow of El Fausto and began towing. 2 days later, Spanish authorities received a crushing telegram. Apparently the night before, as El Fausto was being towed, it suddenly lurched forward and went bow down into the water and sunk so rapidly that it ripped the tow line off of the back of the Ana de Mayo and was underwater well before they could do anything to try to stop it. The crew of the Ana de Mayo swore they had followed procedure and they knew what they were doing, and this was just kind of a freak thing. The ship was now gone, and so too was the dead body, so they couldn't even positively identify whoever that was. All they had was that notebook they recovered from inside the engine room. The notebook was sent to La Palma, where it was put in front of the families of the 4 men who were on El Fausto, and very quickly, Julio's wife was able to identify his handwriting. He apparently had a unique way of writing, and she was used to reading it, and so she said, "That's definitely his writing, and in fact, I recognize that notebook." This, of course, meant the dead man inside of the engine room was almost certainly Julio. Julio's wife examined the notebook, and she was able to decipher that last page, at least most of it, and she said it was this very detailed description of exactly what she needed to do once he died. Based on the way he was writing, he knew he was about to die. And at first it says, here's how you access my insurance policy, and here are the different properties I own, and how you go about selling them. And then in his final moments, he scrawled one last message at the very bottom of the last page that said, "Don't ever tell our son all that has happened to me. You know that God wanted this fate for me. Love you." So if Julio was so sure he was about to die that he would take the time to write out a detailed list of instructions for his wife to follow, why didn't he take the time to also offer a small explanation as to what happened to he and the other crew members of El Fausto? Unless he did write a description, except it was in those 28 pages in the middle of the notebook that had been removed. And if that's the case, then who removed them and why? And where's the rest of the El Fausto crew? And why did they tell the Duquesa that nothing was wrong with their ship? And why didn't they take the tow into shore, which would have guaranteed their safety? There's just so many questions that have never been answered in 50 years. The most widely accepted theory is the crew of El Fausto experienced a series of small but compounding setbacks that, combined with panic, led to really bad decision-making and ultimately their death. Others say there are just too many anomalies and oddities about this case to just be a product of bad decision-making, that there has to be something else going on. And so there are lots of alternative theories about what happened, ranging from abduction to illegal trafficking gone wrong, to perhaps they saw something they shouldn't have. But sadly, no one will know for sure what happened to these guys until there is a major break in the case. And at this point, people are just hoping those missing 28 pages turn up and that those will be able to explain what happened to El Fausto and her crew. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.